I want to illustrate something through a couple of scenes from movies and TV shows. It's something that we don't really have a word for in the English language. Maybe it's a sort of masculine virtue. There's a very specific thing that I want to point toward. And the best way I can describe it is by pointing to specific examples from specific scenes in media. There's a scene in an episode from the first season of The Walking Dead, and that show has its silliness. There's some aspects of it that are dumb, but there's a few scenes in shows and movies that, maybe would otherwise not be that good, but these handful of scenes make it all worth watching because they're so rare and they're so hard to find in media. These three guys, their friend has been kidnapped by this other gang. Basically, they need to get him back. The other gang won't give him up unless they give up a bag of guns. They need the guns, so they don't want to do that.
Guns worth more than gold. Gold won't protect your family, put food on the table. You willing to give that up for that kid?
There's a moment where they realize they're going to have to go in and fight these guys. And the character, Daryl, at this point in this episode, has really kind of been wronged by these other guys. They're not really in good standing with him. I mean, he doesn't owe them anything. They kind of owe him something. For all he knows, his brother may be dead because of them. So he doesn't have any strong reasons to be loyal to these guys in this particular situation.
What life I have, I owe to him. He could have walked away, but he didn't.
Their friend gets kidnapped, and they realize this is the situation we're in now. And the other guy that's with them kind of acknowledges, his family. We can't just leave. We're all in this together. Or else, what are we going to tell your family? We can't just go back to camp and tell them we left you here to deal with it yourself. There's a moment where it becomes clear, if you're being honest with yourself, this is the situation I'm in now.
You're gonna hand the guns over.
I didn't say that. There's nothing keeping you two here. You should get out. Head back to camp.
And tell your family what?
Most people in that situation would find a way to slither out of it in a way that avoids the actual issue. They would either cave and give up the guns, which they need for their family's survival, or they would walk away and let their friend be abandoned, or they would find some other excuse. That's what most people would actually do. They would go back to camp and they would make up an excuse about what happened to try to make it seem better than it was. But Daryl's character is so interesting here because he doesn't have any reason to be loyal to these guys. And I'm not saying that it makes him virtuous because he chooses to anyway. I'm not saying it's virtuous to be loyal to someone who you have no reason to be loyal to. I'm saying it's virtuous that they are all recognizing the weight of the situation and they're not shying away from it. And Rick, of course, is being virtuous in that he's willing to risk his life to save this guy who had previously saved him. But Daryl's character is interesting here because he doesn't have a reason to. This to me is virtue. This to me is masculine virtue. There's one moment and they've kind of been talking it over and they come to this realization. Nothing is said. He just kind of nods his head a little and grabs a shotgun and starts loading it. And they all start grabbing guns. That's what I'm talking about. The willingness to embrace that you're in it completely. And like the odds are against them. Obviously, this other gang probably outnumbers them 10-1. Arguably this is like suicide. But not shying away from it. Acknowledging that this is the path in front of me. Now I must take it, regardless. And it's such a great... The way this character, Daryl, is depicted, it's great because he also, in the conversation leading up to that, he's like, he's asking these questions. He's like qualifying, like, hey, do you really want to do this? Are you really willing to give up the guns? Are you willing to give up your life? How much are you going to bet on this? Those are all the things that would be running through everyone's mind. And so he's sort of like unafraid to say them. And I think a lot of people, liberals, would look at him. I know people who have said this about that character. They don't like him because of the way he talked about it leading up to that. They're like, oh, he's selfish. He doesn't care about their friend. No. He's saying the obvious thing out loud that needs to be said. But what matters is his action. Once he sees the reality of the situation, without saying anything, he just grabs the shotgun and starts loading it. He's in. That's real. See, people think liberal society has led people to believe that you can be moral by just saying the right things. Words are nothing. Words mean nothing. Words are a way of expressing how you feel. They do not make you virtuous. Oh, you've assembled a nice sounding set of words together in an arrangement that makes you sound good. Does that make you moral? Fuck off. Putting your life down for people that you may not even really like because you are willing to face that is the necessity of the situation you're in. That is virtue. The next example that we'll look at is Bruce Wayne from Batman Begins, the Christopher Nolan Batman movie. The part of this movie that's excellent is kind of the origin story of how he becomes Batman. There's a part where he's been dropped off in this kind of rough part of town. He's kind of beginning to see things in a new way. There's a moment where he just makes a decision, again, without saying anything, and he takes off running. This is a guy who has, billions in net worth, big mansion, people work for him. He's got all the comforts of life if he wants them. But he just leaves, and he just goes on the run, and no one's chasing him, but he just disappears. And he trades his coat with a homeless guy so he doesn't stand out.
What? Your jacket? Okay. Hey, let me have it. It's a nice coat.
Be careful who sees you with that. They're gonna come looking for me.
Who?
Everyone.
It's a nice coat.
And he goes on to familiarize himself with the criminal underworld. He ends up in a Chinese prison. Eventually he ends up in what is effectively a compound in the mountains. Looks sort of like a monastery, but it's a compound of vigilantes who show him a way. There are great scenes where he's training with these vigilantes. There's one where he's sword fighting Liam Neeson's character, and he's talking about his father not having had training, and that being the reason for his failure. And Liam Neeson's character responds by saying, "Training is nothing. Will is everything. The will to act."
Anger does not change the fact that your father failed to act.
A man had a gun.
Would that stop you?
I've had training.
The training is nothing. The will is everything. The will to act.
That line alone, as far as I'm concerned, makes the whole movie worth watching. Even if there are parts, and it is a good movie, but even when there are parts of a movie or show that are kind of lame, these moments, these flashes of brilliance are so important and so rare that it makes the whole thing worth consuming. Because that's just true. The will to act is everything. But mainly what I wanted to focus on with that was Bruce Wayne's willingness in a moment to follow this thing that is pulling him to explore whatever it is he needs to explore. Now, most people would go back to, they would go home and they would tell people and they would make plans, situate their life and make sure everything is sorted and have contingencies and backups. And after much careful deliberation, they would then go and do something. But the force of will and the strength of desire to literally just walk away in the city and then to wherever life leads you without a plan, you don't know where you're going to sleep tonight, you don't have much on you. That is real. And that is masculine virtue. The willingness to jump all in without going and trying to make some backup plan or without waiting to sleep on it. What it means is that that character, the strength of his desire to pursue whatever he needed to find was so overwhelming that he had to do it right there and then. That is beautiful. Whatever that is, that instinct is what I'm trying to point at. The last example I'll bring up is Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. I would be remiss if I did not bring up Lord of the Rings in this context, because it's probably the thing that I quote more than anything, and it is, there are many good moments actually like this that I'm describing in Lord of the Rings. For this, I want to focus on the character of Aragorn. What's very interesting about his character is, when you read the books, the impression that we're given and what we're told about the way that he conducts his life, certainly, during the story, but also prior to it, is very fascinating to me. He is effectively shunned by most of society. People see him as dangerous or unwanted. They don't really want him around. Him and his brothers, his compatriots, let's say, who are taking up the task basically of keeping this region safe from whatever evil forces may be encroaching into the area, whether it be wolves or orc bands that have ventured far to the north. Basically, there's an increasing degree of danger in the region, and the civilians, whether they recognize it or not, are protected by Aragorn and his rangers, who live in the wilderness without homes. They are hobos. Again, people probably see them as dirty, homeless losers, but maybe also fear them. The way that he and his friends are perceived does not enter into his calculation for what his actions are going to be. He cares maybe about the wisdom of people he trusts. He's not particularly interested in keeping up appearances. In the movies, they do a great job of portraying him in this cool way because he's shadowy and mysterious, and that's neat. But, if you take that story and apply it to reality, what this actually means is this is a homeless guy who's probably usually pretty dirty. It says he had pretty worn out clothes. He carries weapons. He's probably alarming to people. He's a transient. He's roaming from place to place, just making people probably uncomfortable as far as civilians are concerned, except for those who have direct experience with what he's doing for them. And this is the descendant of the king of Gondor, the rightful heir to the throne. But there's something worth thinking about there, because he's not in Gondor playing political games. This is what I'm trying to point at. I think most people in his shoes today, if you were in that world, if you were in Middle Earth in his role, the average American today would go to Gondor and start trying to participate in politics and trying to slither his way up the ladder to get into a position where he could take the throne. Aragorn understands that the time is not ripe for that until later. And he understands probably early in his life that he needs to first become the man that will be needed, if not for the throne, for the people around him. In that scenario, he's following a path that is in front of him. There's masculine virtue in realizing that this is the path that you must follow. It is not glamorous. It's not high status. You're not going to win in the short term by pursuing it. But it is the right thing to do because your sense of what is right is guiding you to it. That is the ultimate example of masculine virtue. And no doubt, if again, obviously this is a fictional story, but if we extrapolate it to reality, what it would look like, it is likely that if Aragorn were to go to Gondor in his early life, and rather than learning about tracking and hunting and fighting and riding and wilderness skills, if he instead went to Gondor and learned political games, I think there's a sense in which a young Aragorn would understand that would have destroyed his soul, would have damaged his soul, his spirit. His strength of spirit was preserved by his willingness to pursue other things in the shadows. Because a system, I mean, you can only imagine. Again, we're not told much about the inner workings of politics in Gondor. But if we are going to, let's just imagine that it's similar to the way that politics works in the world today, in the Western world. To play that game, you have to become a different kind of person. You have to give up who you were, and you have to become a different kind of person. And that different kind of person is a worse kind of person. You have to sacrifice the potential for virtue that you had and sort of become this two-faced, fake thing that is in some ways copying everyone else, and in some ways just saying whatever the thing is that you think you need to say to get what you want. That is politics. That is the pursuit of power by normal means. And no doubt it wasn't that Aragorn had some crystal ball where he knew that if he just laid low in the wilderness for however many years, that he would eventually retake the throne. That wasn't his intention at all. He would have, no doubt, lived the rest of his life in exile if that's what he felt was right, and if that's what the circumstance demanded. All this stuff, again, I've talked about this before. People may think it's silly because it's fictional characters, but these fictional characters, these and others, are writing the programming of our minds. Fiction absolutely, whether it's books or movies or TV, it absolutely writes the code that runs the human mind. And I think that very often people are channeling the spirit of a fictional character when they behave in a certain way that's been influenced by what they've watched. So whether or not you think it's silly, all of that is having an influence on you. So to me, it's a question of which characters are you going to be influenced by? And whether they're fictional or not doesn't really matter. In the absence of virtuous men in the world to watch and be inspired by, the next best thing may be to look for these little flashes of brilliance in fiction that show what this virtue could be like.